Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into laughter at the abyss of high time. We're leaving the bright, comfortable lights of modern certainty far behind us, and we're descending into a grim, dark, Gothic fable. This is a place where deep philosophical inquiry collides head-on with the vivid, visceral storytelling of a graphic novel. We're going to explore the parables of the Dark Camelot psychodrama, which is this brilliant textual landscape that forces us to look right into the abyss of our own created truths. So, settle in and prepare for a heavy psychological journey into the very architecture of reality and rebellion. So, picture this. Our story doesn't start on some epic, sprawling battlefield. No. It begins in utter, claustrophobic isolation. Imagine a limestone chamber measuring exactly 6 paces by 4. Inside this suffocating, tiny space sits a lone scribe. This is where the entire universe of our psychodrama is born. There's no sprawling kingdom yet, just a single mind in a stone cell holding a steel quill. This cell is the absolute foundation of everything we're about to explore. It represents the very boundaries of the self before it ever even engages with the outside world. Okay, let's dive into this. The scribe dips that steel quill into the ink, presses it to the paper, and firmly declares, "I am." That single, solitary act of self-definition is literally the spark of existence. But, according to the deep Fichtean philosophy driving this parable, stating "I am" isn't free. It instantly manifests its own heavy, unavoidable antithesis. You see, the moment the scribe claims his identity, he simultaneously creates everything that he is not. The paper, the wooden desk, the crushing, heavy stone walls, and the looming, oppressive shadow of an armored knight. They all just snap into reality. To define the self is to immediately build the prison that surrounds it. And the world that springs from this ink? We call it the Dark Camelot psychodrama. It's a totally fractured, decaying reality. The source material beautifully describes this as a place where the modern, shiny Art Deco towers of rational thought and reason have just completely crumbled. They haven't disappeared, actually. They've regressed into rusted Arthurian armor. It paints a really haunting picture of a world where the foundations of human law, intellectual pride, and objective truth are fundamentally broken. What we're left with is this underlying deep, dark nihilism, a whole landscape built on the ruins of absolute certainty. Enter the protagonist of our fable, the Jester. Wandering through the mud of this fractured purgatory, the Jester finds a crown of rusted iron, the old crown of the scribe. But as soon as he puts it on, he's confronted by the Knight of the Iron Word. Now, this knight isn't a hero. He's a silent anchor to a dead morality. He embodies the rigid "thou shalt" or "do must" of the old world. But the Jester, he possesses a chaotic fire. He represents the world-shattering child of Nietzschean thought. The Jester looks at the knight and he just laughs. He realizes the rusted crown is nothing more than a hollow iron shell. The king's rigid order was never actually carved in stone. It was just a temporary script written on a fragile canvas that has finally reached its structural limit. But this rebellion builds into an even darker revelation. Wandering away from the knight, the Jester steps into a desecrated chapel. Here he finds the Pale Inquisitor, who is guarding a chalice filled with living sapphire ink. This is the Hollow Grail. The Inquisitor mocks the Jester, revealing the horrifying nihilism of the last man. He explains that the Jester's grand quest for truth, his chaotic fire, well, it isn't a true rebellion at all. It's a controlled, perfectly predictable cycle of revolt and reset. The system actually needs the Jester's rebellion to clear the canvas periodically. The whole quest for the Grail is designed merely to keep the frozen kingdom secure. When the Jester looks into the cup, he doesn't see truth. He just sees the Inquisitor's shadow waiting to swallow his sapphire light. Driven to absolute desperation, the Jester descends deep into the limestone belly of Camelot, determined to burn the meticulous ink of his own history. But the flames won't spread. Instead, he finds himself face to face with the ultimate mechanism of his reality. Imagine the cold, mechanical, absolute voice of this imposing entity declaring, "I am the Nichmensch, the final monument of reason and the absolute not I." This is the ultimate, inescapable trap. The Nichmensch is the iron stove of reality, the absolute barrier that defines everything the Jester cannot be. The mechanical voice of the Nichmensch continues its chilling monologue, completely shattering the Jester's illusions of grandeur. It says, "You believe you are the flame that will consume the old world. But your chaotic fire is merely fuel for an iron stove built to sustain a frozen kingdom." Think about the psychological weight of that. The very rebellion the jester relies on to define his freedom is completely co-opted. His fiery passion doesn't destroy the static intellectualism of his jailers, it literally just heats the room for them. The monologue concludes with a crushing finality. You are a truth-telling monster, a built-in function intended to clear the canvas every 500 years. And this brilliantly illustrates the central tragedy of our story. The jester thought he was this grand agent of chaos and change, but he is merely a tragic prisoner of his own rebellion. His entire identity as a revolutionary is just a pre-programmed vibration within the Pale Inquisitor's shadow. He is a tool of the exact system he despises. But the jester does not surrender. This leads us to the climax, the Sapphire Siege. The jester stands before the heavy stone walls of the original scribe's cell. He refuses to be just a function, so he wields the ink blot of high time as a literal siege engine and strikes the gates of his reality. And as he strikes, the world reacts violently. The definitive, meticulous ink lines of the world do not shatter like glass. Instead, they dissolve. The rigid structures just melt away into a dark, fractured purgatory of formless ink. So what happens next is absolutely crucial. The jester achieves his goal, but triggers a massive, terrifying nihilistic pivot. By striking the walls, he realizes a heavy Fichtean truth. Those walls were never his enemy. They were the very boundaries of his existence, created the exact moment he declared, I am. To destroy the walls is to destroy the not-I. But without the not-I to push against, the I cannot exist. By tearing down his own prison, he destroys the anchor of his own soul. He becomes a tragic prisoner of a rebellion that has finally, fatally, run out of things to negate. In the aftermath, right at the center of this collapsing psychodrama sits the broken round table, carved from unrefined stone. The jester sits there, surrounded by the remnants of the old order, monuments to a static morality. This scene perfectly encapsulates passive nihilism. It's a sharp critique of a kingdom that values dead conformity over dynamic change. The armor of the remaining knights isn't forged from virtue, guys. It's forged from institutional fabrications and societal rot. The jester then raises a mirror to these remaining knights. But this isn't a normal mirror. It's one that does not choose sides. It forces absolute, unvarnished reflection. As the knights stare into the mirror's gaze, the horrifying truth of their institutional rot is exposed. Their rigid, Gothic-type identities simply can't withstand the truth. Their very selves blur and bubble away like unclean sorcery. The grand illusion of their noble identity melts entirely into nothingness. Stripped of their armor, their titles, and their Gothic-type lines, the inhabitants of this world are pushed to the absolute threshold. The collapse narrative leaves them, and honestly leaves us, with a brutal dichotomy. On one side, there's the desperate desire to cling to the comfort of old chains, the dead morality that, while completely false, at least provided structure. On the other side is the terrifying freedom of an unwritten horizon. It is the paralyzing dread of having a blank canvas with absolutely no rules, no king's law, and no built-in purpose to guide you. We finally reach the gray twilight of high time. The night of the iron word has crumbled into dust. The jester stands entirely alone. The rebellion is over, mostly because there is literally nothing left to rebel against. He holds the quill, but the inkwell is empty of the old definitive ink. It now contains only the raw, unshaped potentiality of the original blot. The truth he fought so violently for was merely the thing denied the loudest. In this total vacuum, the jester is forced to look directly into the mirror of his own mind. And that brings us to the ultimate precipice of dark nihilism. The old structures are gone. The institutional fabrications have melted away. The canvas is completely cleared, and there is no longer a built-in function to guide the hand. As we leave the dark Camelot psychodrama, I want to leave you with the exact same haunting realization the jester faces staring at that empty inkwell. When all the rusted armor of society is stripped away, and you are standing on an entirely unwritten horizon, without the king's law, can you bear the heavy burden of writing the next line?